Hey, everyone. Never thought I'd be posting something like this, but here we are. Strap in because this one's a wild ride. My name's Mike, and I was married to this woman named Emily for the last 6 years. Now, before you go thinking we were the perfect couple, let me tell you, we weren't. But we had a good thing going, so I thought. Things started to get weird about a month ago. Emily's phone never left her side. She became glued to it. Every ping had her scrambling for it, smiling at the screen like she just won the lottery. She got real secretive, too. If I walked into the room, the phone got tucked away like it was national security she was guarding. And the late nights? She suddenly had a lot of work to do at the office. But in all the years I'd known her, the only late night she ever had was when she binge-watched Friends on Netflix. Of course, I played dumb. Part of me didn't want to believe it. We had a nice house, a decent life. Why mess that up? But, well, my gut wouldn't let it go. There was this gnawing feeling that something wasn't right, but I kept pushing it down because, honestly, I didn't want to face what I was starting to suspect. Who does, right? One night, though, everything changed. I was packing for a business trip I had to take. Just a quick overnight thing, a couple of hours away. We were sitting at the dinner table, making small talk, and she was a little too chirpy, like she was excited for me to leave. That's when it hit me. Her whole vibe was like someone waiting for a package they'd ordered, except I was the one leaving, not her. That's when I overheard her on the phone later that night, whispering like she was a teenager sneaking out of her parents' house. Now, Emily was never good at keeping secrets, so it didn't take much to put 2 and 2 together. I caught bits of her conversation. She was saying things like, "Tomorrow night's perfect, he'll be gone," and my personal favorite, "Don't worry, we'll have the place to ourselves." Yeah, real subtle. That night, lying next to her, I couldn't sleep. I felt this cold, simmering rage building inside of me, but I didn't say a word. I needed to be smart about this. I wasn't going to blow up and give her the chance to cover her tracks. Oh no, I had a plan brewing. So, there I was, lying in bed next to my wife, who clearly had other plans for the next day. I could have confronted her then, could have thrown her phone across the room and demanded to know who she was sneaking around with. But no. I was too pissed for that. I wanted to hit her where it hurt. The element of surprise was going to be my weapon. I wanted to watch her get caught in the act, no escape route, no half-baked excuses. I decided I wouldn't be going on that business trip after all. The next day, I told my boss I needed some personal time off. Luckily, the guy's a real stand-up dude, and he gave me the green light. My next move? The electronics store. I dropped a small fortune on surveillance gear, cameras, hidden microphones, and a nice setup to monitor it all remotely. I wasn't about to mess around. If she was going to invite her boy toy over, I'd have a front row seat to their disgusting little rendezvous. I installed everything while she was at work. I'd seen enough spy movies to know where to hide the cameras, in the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, of course, and even in the damn bathroom. Anywhere she might take her lover, I was going to see it. Now, I wasn't just planning to sit back and watch this dumpster fire happen. No. I wanted to throw a wrench, or rather, a laxative, into their little love fest. See, we had dinner plans that night before I left for the trip, and I made sure to prepare the meal. I slipped the most potent laxatives I could find into her food. I was petty, yes, but when your wife's planning to cheat on you in your own home, I'd say all bets are off. That evening, we sat down to eat, and Emily was glowing. She must have thought she was so slick, so clever, playing house with me while secretly plotting to bring another man into my bed. I watched her scarf down her meal, pretending I didn't have a care in the world, all while knowing her night was about to go very, very wrong. As soon as dinner was done, I gave her a kiss on the cheek, grabbed my suitcase, and said, "See you tomorrow night, babe." She waved me off like the dutiful wife she pretended to be, and off I went. Except, instead of driving to the airport, I drove about 10 minutes away to a hotel. I set up my laptop, connected it to the cameras I'd installed, and waited. Let me tell you, watching your wife scramble to clean up the house for her lover is something you don't forget. She was prancing around, fixing her hair, putting on this new dress I hadn't even seen before. The audacity. And then, the doorbell rang. So there I was, sitting in my hotel room, watching Emily rush to the door like an excited schoolgirl. She fluffed her hair one last time in the hallway mirror, smoothed out her dress, and opened the door to let in her Prince Charming, except this guy looked more like the janitor from some sketchy motel. I nearly burst out laughing at the sight of him. His name, as I later learned, was Brad. Because, of course, it was. Balding, beer gut, looking like he hadn't seen a gym in a decade. And this was the guy she was risking everything for. I leaned back in my chair and cracked open a beer, ready to watch the show unfold. Brad walks in, all smiles, carrying a bottle of cheap wine like they were about to have some grand romantic evening. They started talking, laughing awkwardly like two teenagers on a first date. The kind of stuff that makes your skin crawl when you know what's really going on. They sat on the couch, wine poured, and I could tell Emily was doing her best to play it cool. But that's when I noticed something was off. She shifted in her seat, just a little at first. Then again. And again. I knew exactly what was coming. The laxative was starting to hit. She excused herself, trying to be all casual, and darted for the bathroom. Brad, bless his heart, just sat there clueless, sipping his wine. Meanwhile, I'm watching her through the hidden bathroom camera, and she is not doing well. She's sitting on the toilet, her face twisted in discomfort, and from the looks of it, the worst-case scenario had just kicked in. I'm talking about a full-on intestinal assault. It was glorious. The best part? She tried to make it quick, but this wasn't the kind of situation you just walk away from. After what felt like forever, she came back out, her face slightly pale, and sat next to Brad like nothing had happened. But I could see it in her eyes, she was panicking. Brad tried to get all romantic, moving closer, clearly hoping for some action. But just as his hand slid up her leg, boom, there she went again, bolting for the bathroom. I nearly choked on my beer from laughing so hard. By the time she came out the second time, I could tell the evening wasn't going the way she planned. Brad was getting frustrated, and she was clearly mortified. They tried to salvage the night, but every time things started to get remotely intimate, Emily had to make yet another desperate run to the toilet. It was like watching a soap opera where the punchline just kept coming. And I, sitting in my hotel room with popcorn and a beer, was living for every second of it. They tried watching a movie, but Emily couldn't even sit still for 5 minutes without having to excuse herself again. Brad eventually caught on that something was seriously wrong. He kept asking if she was okay, to which she kept lying through her teeth. "Oh, I'm fine, I must have eaten something bad at lunch." "Yeah, Emily, sure. Must have been the salad you didn't have." Eventually, the romantic vibe was completely dead. Brad was irritated, Emily was humiliated, and the whole evening was a total disaster. They started bickering, with Brad accusing her of being distant and Emily snapping back, clearly annoyed and trying to hold it together, literally and figuratively. She stormed off to the bathroom one final time, and that's when Brad had enough. He got up, grabbed his jacket, and walked out without saying another word. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Watching her sit there alone, probably wondering how her magical night turned into the worst date of all time, gave me a sense of satisfaction I can't even describe. But the best part was yet to come. So there I was, sitting in my hotel room, watching the aftermath of the world's most disastrous date unfold in real time. Emily was alone, probably replaying the whole evening in her head, wondering where it all went wrong. Meanwhile, I'm grinning ear to ear, knowing full well that the laxative was my handiwork. It was petty, sure, but after everything I'd seen, I think I'd earned the right to a little payback. I watched her slump back onto the couch, clearly exhausted from her trips to the bathroom and the emotional wreckage of the night. She sent a few texts, probably trying to explain herself to Brad, but he didn't reply. Can't say I blamed him. If I had to deal with that level of chaos, I'd have ghosted her too. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but honestly, I felt nothing. If anything, I felt a little smug watching her squirm. After a while, she gave up trying to salvage the night. She tossed her phone on the couch, and I could see her stewing in frustration. She was probably angry at Brad, at herself, at the universe for ruining her little fling. But she had no idea the universe was named Mike and I was just getting started. By the next morning, I had a clear plan in my head. I wasn't about to keep living in a house where I knew she was plotting behind my back. So, when I got home that afternoon, I didn't waste any time. As soon as I walked through the door, Emily perked up like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been scrambling to hide her dirty little secret just hours ago. "How was your trip?" she asked, putting on that fake smile she'd probably been practicing. I couldn't even look at her. "We need to talk," I said, cutting straight to the point. That wiped the smile off her face. "I know what you've been up to, Emily," I started, and I could see her whole body tense up. Her eyes darted around like she was searching for a quick excuse or a way out. She stammered something about not knowing what I was talking about, but I wasn't having it. "Don't. Just don't," I said, holding up my hand. "I've seen everything. The cameras, the texts, your little plan to have Brad over while I was gone. I know it all." Her face turned white. For a second, I thought she might actually faint, but instead, she switched tactics. The waterworks started, tears streaming down her face as she tried to plead her case. "Mike, it's not what you think," she sobbed. "I was just lonely, and we've been so distant lately. I made a mistake, but I swear I didn't sleep with him. Nothing happened, I promise." I had to laugh at that. "Nothing happened because you spent the night glued to the toilet, Emily." "I made sure of that," I said, and her eyes widened in shock. "Yeah, I put laxatives in your dinner. Figured if you were gonna cheat on me in my own house, the least I could do was make sure it wasn't a good time." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She had no comeback for that. The tears kept flowing, and she tried to reach out to me, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me. I don't care what you think or what you feel. You've been lying to me for God knows how long, and now, it's over." She collapsed onto the couch, bawling her eyes out, but I wasn't moved. Not even a little. "You've got until the end of the week to pack your things and get out," I said, my voice cold. "If you're not gone by then, I'll throw your stuff in the trash. And don't think about trying to guilt me into anything. I've already filed for divorce. You're done." I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. "Please, Mike, I'll do anything. I was stupid, I know. We can fix this. I don't want to lose you," she begged, her voice shaking. "Too late for that," I said, turning my back on her. "You didn't care about losing me when you invited that loser into our house. Now you've got to live with the consequences." I walked out of the living room, leaving her sobbing on the couch, and locked myself in the bedroom. I wasn't going to let her guilt me into forgiving her. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into thinking this was something we could fix. It was over. She knew it. I knew it. And soon enough, the rest of the world would know it too. What she didn't know was that I had one final card to play. I'd like to say I felt some kind of satisfaction after that confrontation, but truth be told, I was still pissed. The whole situation just felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from, and Emily's tears did nothing to soften the blow. So, while she was sobbing in the living room, I locked myself in the bedroom and started putting the last pieces of my plan together. You see, it wasn't enough for me to just kick her out and get a divorce. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her actions. Emily might have thought she could cheat on me in my own house and walk away with a sad little apology, but I wasn't going to let her off that easy. And Brad? Well, that man had his own reckoning coming. The next morning, I woke up before she did. It was like living with a ghost. She'd spent the night in the guest room, probably crying herself to sleep, and frankly, I didn't care. I grabbed my phone and made a few calls. First, to my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. I wanted her served by the end of the week. Then, to Brad's wife. Yup. You heard that right. This fool, Brad, had a wife. Her name was Jessica, and she had no idea what her scumbag husband had been up to. Lucky for her, I did. I called her that morning. It wasn't a conversation I was looking forward to, but it had to be done. The phone rang a few times before she picked up. Hello, she answered, her voice bright and cheerful. She had no clue what was coming. Hi, Jessica, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My name's Mike. I'm, Emily's husband. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Oh. Mike. Hi. Is everything okay? She asked, clearly confused. I took a deep breath and said it straight. Listen, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I think you need to know that Brad has been seeing my wife behind your back. They were planning to meet up at our house while I was away for work. I've got proof, and I thought you deserved to see it. Another long pause. Then, in a much quieter voice, she said, Are you sure about this? Unfortunately, yeah, I replied, feeling that familiar pang of anger rising in my chest. I've got emails, texts, and footage from security cameras. I can send you everything if you want. I hung up and looked over at Emily, who was still in the guest room, probably wondering if I was going to change my mind. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. Later that day, I met Jessica at a small coffee shop not too far from where we lived. When I got there, I realized that Jessica was stunning. Like, how could Brad cheat on her with Emily? I mean, I know my wife wasn't ugly, but compared to Jessica, it was like Brad was trading a Porsche for a used minivan. Jessica looked devastated when I handed her all the evidence I'd collected, emails, screenshots, even a few clips from the cameras. Watching her face fall as she read through everything, I almost felt guilty for delivering the news. But she deserved to know the truth, and Brad deserved whatever was coming his way. We sat there for a while, talking about the whole mess. She thanked me for telling her, though I could tell she was shattered. She kept shaking her head in disbelief, saying things like, How could he do this? And, I thought we were happy. We exchanged numbers, and I told her if she needed any more evidence or support, I was happy to help. I wasn't trying to play the knight in shining armor, but I figured if we were both going through this dumpster fire of betrayal, we might as well look out for each other. As I walked back to my car, I realized that was the nail in the coffin for Emily's affair, and her life as she knew it. She wasn't just losing me. Brad was about to lose his wife, and once that happened, the house of cards would come crashing down for everyone involved. But I wasn't quite done yet. After my meeting with Jessica, I felt a strange sense of calm. The ball was rolling, and I knew it wouldn't be long before everything came crashing down on both Emily and Brad. They thought they could play me, that they could play us both, but now the truth was out in the open. I couldn't wait to see how they handled it. That night, when I got home, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, looking like she hadn't slept at all. She had this pathetic, hopeful look in her eyes like maybe, just maybe, I was going to change my mind and forgive her. I didn't even have the energy to entertain it. You've got 3 days, I said flatly, throwing a copy of the divorce papers on the table. I'll be staying at a friend's place until you're out. If you're still here by the end of the week, I'll have the cops escort you out. She blinked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mike, wait, please, we can talk about this. I didn't actually sleep with him. Can't we just? I cut her off. Don't. I don't care if you slept with him or not. You plan to, and that's all I need to know. You betrayed me, Emily. There's no fixing this. She tried to argue, to backtrack, to explain herself, but I wasn't listening. I was done with the lies, the excuses, the fake tears. Every time she opened her mouth, all I heard was more manipulation. So, I just turned and walked away. I could hear her sobbing as I went upstairs to pack a bag, but it didn't affect me. I had bigger things to focus on. Before I left the house, I decided to drop one last bomb. Oh, by the way, I said casually, I met up with Brad's wife today. I showed her everything. The look on Emily's face was priceless. It was as if the blood drained from her entire body. You, what? She gasped, her voice shaking. Yep, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Turns out, Brad's been lying to her too. She knows everything now. I wouldn't be surprised if she's already talking to a divorce lawyer. Emily looked like she'd just been punched in the gut. Her hands trembled as she stared at me, her eyes wide with panic. Mike, no, you didn't. Why would you do that? This is between us. I laughed at her audacity. Between us? Are you kidding? You blew up our marriage, Emily. Now you've got to deal with the consequences. Brad's wife deserves to know just as much as I did. She stood up from the table, her face twisted with desperation. But, Mike. I love you. I didn't want this to happen. I don't know what I was thinking. Can't we fix this? I shook my head slowly. You weren't thinking about me, that's for sure. You were thinking about yourself, about Brad. You didn't care about what this would do to me or to us. Now it's over. You made your choice. Deal with it. I walked out of the house, leaving her standing there in shock. Part of me wondered if she really believed that I'd let this slide, that somehow, we could patch things up and move on. But that was never going to happen. Trust, once broken, can't be repaired, and Emily had shattered it beyond recognition. As I drove to my friend's place, my phone buzzed. It was Jessica. I confronted Brad, her text read. He tried to deny it, but when I showed him the proof, he broke down and admitted everything. I'm filing for divorce. I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. Brad and Emily thought they could sneak around and live happily ever after, but now their entire world was crumbling. And they had no one to blame but themselves. Over the next few days, things unraveled fast. I stayed at my friend Dave's place, who, by the way, was more than happy to hand me a beer and a good riddance speech when I told him what happened. He'd never liked Emily much, but he kept that to himself until now. I appreciated the support, even though it felt surreal to be crashing on his couch while my soon-to-be ex-wife was at home, figuring out her next move. Emily, of course, tried every trick in the book to get me back. Texts, calls, voicemails, all filled with the same pathetic apologies. It was a mistake, Mike. I'll do anything to fix this. Please don't throw away our marriage. Yeah, as if I was the one throwing it away. She had done that the moment she started sneaking around behind my back. I ignored every single one of her messages. The only thing left to say would be in court. Meanwhile, things with Brad and his wife Jessica were blowing up too. She'd wasted no time. Within 48 hours, Brad was served with divorce papers and kicked out of the house. Apparently, he tried to win her back, pulling the same sob story Emily had tried on me, but Jessica wasn't having it. She was smart, strong, and wasn't about to be taken for a fool. Jessica and I stayed in touch through all of this. We weren't exactly becoming best friends, but there was a weird sense of solidarity between us. After all, we were both dealing with the same betrayal, and it helped having someone to talk to who really got it. We'd text every now and then, sharing updates on the fallout, almost like comparing notes. There was something oddly comforting about knowing I wasn't the only one whose life had been turned upside down. Then, on the Friday of that week, it happened. I got a text from Emily, "Mike, I'm coming to pick up my things. Please be home so we can talk." I rolled my eyes. There was nothing left to talk about. Still, I figured it was time to officially get her out of my life. I told her I'd meet her at the house, mainly because I didn't want her going through our stuff without me there. I wasn't about to trust her with anything at this point. When I pulled up to the house that afternoon, she was already there, sitting in her car, waiting. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept or eaten in days. Part of me felt a tiny twinge of pity, but that was quickly overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. She'd made her bed, and now she was lying in it. I got out of my car and walked up to her, crossing my arms as I leaned against the porch railing. "You've got until tomorrow to get your stuff and go," I said, not even bothering with a hello. She blinked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. "Mike, please, can't we at least try to talk?" I sighed, shaking my head. "What's left to talk about, Emily? You cheated. You lied. You broke our marriage. Now you're out of chances. It's over." She opened her mouth to say something but then closed it, realizing there was nothing she could say that would change my mind. "I still love you," she muttered, almost like she was trying to convince herself. I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, I used to love you too. But that was before you decided Brad was worth more than our entire marriage. Now, I don't feel a damn thing." Her face crumbled, and for a second, I thought she might try to beg again, but instead, she just nodded, defeated. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll pack my things." I watched her walk inside, and for the first time in days, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was it, the end of the line. As she packed up her things, I stood in the living room, watching her throw clothes into boxes, her movements sluggish and slow, like she was in a daze. Part of me wanted to feel bad for her, but I couldn't. Not after everything. It took a few hours, but by the time she was done, the house felt lighter. Like her presence had been suffocating me, and now I could finally breathe. She dragged the last of her bags out to the car, and I followed her to the front door. "Goodbye, Emily," I said, my voice flat, offering nothing more than a cold finality. She turned to look at me one last time, her eyes filled with regret. "Goodbye, Mike," she whispered, and then, without another word, she got in her car and drove away. I watched her taillights disappear down the street, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. But just when I thought it was all over, life threw one last curveball at me. After Emily's car disappeared from view, I stood there for a while, just staring at the empty street, feeling a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. It was finally over, or so I thought. I headed back inside, ready to collapse on the couch and enjoy the peace and quiet of my newly Emily-free life. But as I walked into the living room, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. "We need to talk. Call me when you can." I raised an eyebrow. Jessica and I had been keeping in touch, but this felt different, urgent. I didn't hesitate, dialing her number and pressing the phone to my ear as I sat down. "Hey, what's up?" I asked. Her voice was shaky, like she was holding back tears. "Mike, I just found out something about Brad, something you need to know." My heart sank. "What now?" I thought I'd reached the bottom of the barrel when it came to this whole nightmare. "Okay, hit me." She hesitated for a moment before dropping the bomb. Brad wasn't just seeing Emily. He was seeing other women too. A lot of them. I found messages, emails, it wasn't just her. My jaw tightened. "You're telling me Emily wasn't even his only affair?" "Not even close," Jessica said, her voice filled with bitterness. "Brad's been cheating on me with multiple women, and from what I can gather, Emily was just one of many." I thought you should know. I sat there, stunned. Emily wasn't just having an affair with some guy who'd swept her off her feet, she was one in a long line of conquests for this scumbag. My anger, which I thought had peaked, reignited with full force. The fact that Emily had thrown away our marriage for that. For some serial cheater who clearly didn't give a damn about her. It made the whole thing even more pathetic. Thanks for telling me, I finally said, trying to process it all. I guess it's just more proof that they both deserve whatever's coming. Jessica sighed. Yeah. It's been a rough few days. I'm filing for divorce, obviously, but I don't know, Mike. It just feels like a bad dream. I can't believe this is my life now. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Trust me, I get it. But you're doing the right thing. We both are. We're better off without them. She was quiet for a moment, then said, You're right. It's just hard to see that sometimes, you know. I do. But we'll get through it. They're the ones who'll have to live with the consequences of their choices. We talked for a bit longer, mostly about how ridiculous it all was, how Emily and Brad had managed to destroy 2 marriages for a fling that meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. It was almost laughable, except neither of us was in the mood to laugh. When we hung up, I sat there, staring at my phone. Emily didn't know yet, about Brad's other affairs, about how she wasn't special. A part of me wanted to tell her, to throw it in her face and watch her crumble under the weight of her own stupidity. But another part of me didn't care anymore. She wasn't my problem. Not anymore. A few days passed, and I settled into a new routine. The house was quieter, cleaner, and, most importantly, free of the tension that had been hanging over it for months. Emily tried texting me a couple more times, begging for another chance, but I ignored her. It was over. I'd made my peace with it. And then, one evening, I got another surprise. There was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jessica standing there, looking as tired and worn out as I felt. Hey, she said softly. Hey, I replied, stepping aside to let her in. We sat down in the living room, and for a while, we just talked. Not about Emily and Brad, not about the affairs, but about life. About what came next. It was strange, sitting there with someone who had been through the exact same storm, yet still felt like a stranger in many ways. But it was also comforting. We were both navigating the wreckage, trying to figure out how to rebuild. Eventually, Jessica smiled, just a small, tired smile, but it was real. You know, she said, it's weird, but I feel like we're going to be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. I nodded. Yeah. We will. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I actually believed it. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I realized something. Betrayal can break you, it can tear your world apart and leave you questioning everything. But it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be the end. You can pick up the pieces, rebuild, and even find a little light in the darkness. Emily and Brad. They were just chapters in our stories. And now? Well, we were writing new ones. That's my story. If you're reading this and you're going through something similar, just know, there's life after betrayal. You can survive it. You can move on. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, you'll find something better on the other side.
Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support and for tuning into my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Warm regards.